Have you ever noticed how quickly people decide who gets left behind? Not loudly, not with cruelty they'll admit to, just a glance, a calculation, and then they run without you. Come closer. I want to tell you something honestly. This is one of those stories that doesn't start with heroes. It starts with abandonment, with a crippled woman dragging herself across a floor no one bothered to clear for her, with a giant man hiding in the corner because the world taught him that being seen was dangerous. Two people everyone else decided were disposable, on the same platform at the same doomed moment. What happens next isn't romance in the usual sense, it's strategy. Trust built in seconds. A pact forged under gunfire where one becomes the legs and the other becomes the mind. Where weakness, instead of ending them, locks together into something terrifyingly strong. Stay with me for a moment. Walk into the fire with me. Because this journey isn't really about violence or legends. It's about what happens when the people society discards stop waiting to be saved and choose each other instead.
They didn't even slow down. That was what burned the most. Not the gunfire echoing through Eagle's Nest waystation, not the shouted orders, not even the sound of the rope bridge groaning under the weight of fleeing bodies. It was the fact that no one looked back. Lady Vesper Ashcroft lay flat on the wooden platform, palms raw and bleeding as she dragged herself forward inch by inch. Her legs followed uselessly behind her, heavy and unresponsive, as foreign to her now as someone else's limbs. "Wait," she called, her voice hoarse. "Please, just a moment." A woman in a fur-trimmed coat glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes flicked down, taking in the twisted legs, the ruined posture, the crawling body. Then she turned away. The bridge ropes were slashed seconds later. Vesper watched the planks tumble into the gorge, watched her last clean exit vanish into mist and distance. The sound it made, wood snapping, cables screaming, felt final in a way gunshots never did. So, this is it, she thought. Not a courtroom, not a duel, just being inconvenient. 5 years earlier, she had been Vesper Ashcroft of the Denver Ashcrofts, railroad heiress, negotiator. A woman men twice her age hesitated to contradict. Then a fall from a horse shattered her spine and rearranged her world in a single afternoon. They'd called it tragic, then impractical, then expensive. Her cousins had smiled gently while removing her name from documents. They'd said it was for her own good. A woman who couldn't walk, after all, couldn't possibly manage an empire. She had learned then what abandonment really sounded like. Not shouting, not cruelty, just silence. Boots thundered on the outer stairs now, the Vulture's gang. 20 men who smelled gold and didn't waste time on mercy. Vesper reached the dead marshal's revolver and rolled onto her side, checking the cylinder with practiced fingers. 4 bullets. She exhaled slowly. Calculating, always calculating. If they come through the east door first, I take 2. If they split, I retreat behind the desk. If they rush... Her plan stopped forming when she saw him. In the corner of the freight room, half hidden behind stacked crates, crouched something enormous. A man, barely. He was huge, grotesquely so. Shoulders sloped forward, spine hunched, arms too long, hands thick and misshapen like stone tools. His face was wrong in a way people instinctively feared. Heavy brow, jaw thrust forward, features stretched by seal and imbalance. He looked less like a person than a force of nature that had accidentally learned to wear clothes. And he was shaking. Barnaby Cobb watched the bridge collapse through a cracked window, his breath coming fast and shallow. He'd known this moment would come someday. Knew that when things went bad, no one would think to grab the ogre from the freight room. Strong as an ox, dumb as one too. That was what they said when they thought he couldn't hear. Now the waystation was lost, the gold was lost, and so was he. He drew his knees closer to his chest as the first shout echoed inside the building. "Clear the rooms!" Vesper followed his gaze. The giant wasn't reaching for a weapon. He wasn't running. He wasn't even praying. He was waiting to die. Something in her snapped. Not fear, not despair, but fury, cold and precise. She had spent her life being underestimated, being spoken over, being left behind. She would not die silently. She raised her voice and cut through the chaos like a blade. "You!" she barked. "The big one in the corner." Barnaby flinched hard like a kicked dog. He looked around confused. Me? Yes, you," Vesper said, locking eyes with him. "Do you want to be butchered where you're hiding, or do you want a chance?" His mouth opened, closed. I ain't smart, ma'am. I ain't fast. I don't need smart," she said, dragging herself upright behind the desk, revolver steady in her hand. "I need strong, and I need you right here, now." The shouting was closer, boots on wood, guns cocking. Barnaby stared at her, this broken woman with fire in her eyes, commanding him like he mattered. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Slowly, heavily, he stood. And as he took his first step toward her, something shifted in the room, not hope, but possibility. Barnaby Cobb crossed the room like a man walking into a sentence he didn't know how to finish. Every instinct he had told him to stop, to turn back, to fold himself into the shadows where expectations were low and death would come quickly. That was safer, familiar. But the woman watching him didn't look like someone who accepted familiar endings. Vesper Ashcroft met his eyes without flinching. Not with pity, not with fear, with assessment. Good, she thought. He listens. "Closer," she ordered. Barnaby obeyed, each step shaking the floorboards. Up close, he smelled of sweat and iron and honest work. His hands twitched, unsure what to do with themselves. "I can't shoot," he said quickly, as if confessing a crime. "I can barely read. Folks say I'm slow." Vesper snorted. "Then it's fortunate I can shoot and think for both of us." Gunfire cracked outside. A bullet punched through the window frame and buried itself in the wall. They were out of time. Vesper dragged herself higher behind the overturned desk, bracing her useless legs against the wood so she could sit upright. "Listen to me very carefully," she said. "Those men out there are hunters. They see me as weak. They see you as stupid. That's an advantage." Barnaby frowned. "It is?" "Yes," she said, "because they won't expect us to fight like this." She held up her belt, thick leather, sturdy buckle. "I can't run," she continued calmly. "You can't aim, but you can carry me, and I can turn you into something they can't ignore." Barnaby's breath hitched. "You mean on my back?" "Yes, like a pack mule?" Vesper's voice hardened. "Like a knight." That word landed differently. Barnaby swallowed. No one had ever used that word anywhere near him. "They'll shoot me," he whispered. "They'll try," she replied, "and while they're wasting time trying to kill something too big and too angry to drop quickly, I'll be ending the conversation." A shout echoed closer. The freight room door rattled under a heavy kick. Barnaby looked at the door, then at Vesper. "What if I drop you?" "Then we die," she said evenly. "But if you don't pick me up, we die anyway." Another kick. Wood splintered. Barnaby made his choice. He crouched, careful, despite his size, and let Vesper climb onto his hunched back. She looped the belt around his chest and her waist, pulling it tight with practiced hands. The contact startled him. Her weight was light, but her presence was absolute. She wasn't clinging in fear. She was positioning herself. "Can you breathe?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now, listen only to my voice." The door burst open. 3 vultures rushed in, guns raised, and froze. What stood before them wasn't a man. It was a siege engine. Barnaby straightened to his full height, nearly scraping the ceiling, a woman strapped to his back like a living command post, revolver already barking fire. "Left!" Vesper shouted. Barnaby swung, his fist, big as a hammer, connected with the first man's chest and sent him flying backward into a crate with a wet crack. "Down!" Barnaby dropped instinctively. A bullet whined over his head. Vesper fired twice. 2 men fell. Silence hit, hard and fast. Barnaby stood there, panting, heart hammering so loud he could barely hear. "I did it," he whispered. "You're doing it," Vesper corrected. "Now move. We can't stay." They burst into the main hall, where chaos reigned, vultures scrambling, smoke starting to curl from the far side of the station, eyes turned, mouths opened. "What in hell—" "Table!" Vesper snapped. Barnaby grabbed the heavy oak table and hurled it end over end. It crashed into a knot of men, scattering them like pins. "Bar! Cover!" They slammed behind the bar as bullets shredded wood. Barnaby's hands were shaking now, not with fear, but with something wild and unfamiliar. Purpose. "Listen to me," Vesper said close to his ear. "They think you're just muscle. That means they'll make mistakes. When I say move, you move. When I say stop, you stop. No thinking, no second guessing. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said immediately. "Yes, I can do that." She smiled. "A sharp, dangerous thing. Good. Then we leave this place." She glanced once, briefly, at the shattered bridge outside, at the world that had abandoned them. "This station was never home," she said. "Civilization decided we weren't worth carrying, so we don't go back to it." Barnaby didn't know exactly what she meant, but when she said "we," something in his chest eased. "Forward!" she shouted, and together they charged, away from the platform, away from the expectations that had kept them small and broken. When the world decides who is worth saving, it rarely asks the right questions. Strength without direction is wasted. Intelligence without power is ignored. But when 2 discarded people choose each other, something dangerous is born, not because they are perfect, but because they finally stop apologizing for what they are. Behind them, Eagle's Nest, waystation burned. Ahead of them lay fire, blood, and a future no one had prepared for. And neither of them looked back. They escaped the waystation just before the first swallowed it whole. Barnaby ran downhill through the pines, smoke clawing at his lungs, Vesper strapped tight against his back. Her cheek pressed to the ridge of his shoulder, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Keep left," she said. "The ravine will funnel them. They won't risk the drop in the dark." He obeyed without question. For hours after, they moved in silence, through timber and stone, across narrow animal paths, slick with frost. Barnaby's strength carried them far, but strength alone could not warm the night. Autumn in the Colorado high country bit hard and early. Wind cut through their clothes. Vesper's fingers went numb around the gun. When dawn came, it brought no comfort. They reached a shallow cave tucked beneath a granite overhang. Barnaby set Vesper down gently, unbuckling the belt with hands that trembled from exhaustion. "I'll make fire," he said quickly, as if afraid she'd think less of him for needing rest. "Sit," Vesper replied, not sharply. Just enough. He sat. She studied him for the first time without urgency. His chest heaved. Blood seeped from a long gash along his forearm where a bullet had grazed him, something he hadn't mentioned. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." She dragged herself closer, tore a strip from her sleeve, and wrapped his arm with efficient care. "Don't lie to me," she said quietly. "I don't have time for it." He flushed, eyes dropping. "Sorry, ma'am." The word grated. "Don't call me that," she said. He looked up, startled. "What should I—" "Vesper." He tried it. "Vesper." It sounded strange in his mouth, right and wrong at the same time. They ate dried meat in silence while the fire crackled. Barnaby sat near the cave mouth, shoulders hunched, watching the trees. Vesper noticed how he positioned himself, always between her and the open ground. "You don't have to guard me," she said. He shrugged. "Feels correct." Distance returned after that, not physical, emotional. Barnaby kept his answer short. "Yes, no, I'll do it." He moved like a tool waiting for instruction, afraid that if he relaxed, the usefulness would drain out of him. Vesper saw it, and it angered her more than the vultures ever had. That afternoon, the mountain struck back. They were crossing a scree slope when the ground shifted. A cascade of loose stone slid under Barnaby's feet. He stumbled hard, twisting to keep Vesper from being crushed. They hit the ground together. Pain exploded through Barnaby's leg. He roared, a raw animal sound, and rolled onto his side, clutching his knee. Vesper's breath left her in a sharp cry. She lay pinned against him, the belt still holding them together. "Barnaby," she said, "look at me." He was pale, teeth clenched, eyes bright with pain and panic. "I broke it," he gasped. "I knew I would. I'm useless now. I told you." "Stop," she snapped. "Stop talking." She braced her hands against the rocks and levered herself upright with brutal effort, freeing her chest. Then she examined his leg with calm precision. "Dislocated," she said, "not broken." He stared at her. "How do you know?" "Because I've had doctors lie to me for 5 years," she said, "and because you're screaming instead of bleeding." She set her jaw. "This is going to hurt. I can't." "You can," she said, "and you will. For me." She counted once, twice, then shoved. Barnaby screamed again as the joint slid back into place. Sweat poured down his face. His hands clawed at the dirt. Then the pain eased, not gone, manageable. He sagged back, shaking. You fixed me." "Yes," she said, "and now you'll listen." She dragged herself closer until they were face to face, her at his level now, not below it. "You are not a mule," she said. "You are not a shield. You are not something I discard when damaged. If you break, we stop. If you hurt, we deal with it. Do you understand?" He nodded weakly. "I don't need a monster," she continued. "I need a partner, and partners don't apologize for being human." Something in Barnaby cracked, not loudly, quietly, like ice splitting under weight. No one had ever corrected him like that. "I don't know how to be that," he whispered. "You're learning," she said. "So am I." That night, the temperature dropped fast. Frost crept across the cave floor. Barnaby built the fire higher, then lay down beside it, careful to leave space. "Come closer," he said after a while, embarrassed. "You'll freeze." Vesper hesitated, then dragged herself nearer, her shoulder resting against his massive arm. He went very still. "You're warm," she said. "So are you," he replied, surprised. Silence followed, not strained, just present. Later, when the wind howled through the pines, Vesper spoke into the dark. "Do you know what scared me most back there?" she asked. "That they'd kill you," Barnaby said immediately. "No," she said, "that no one tried to help me, not even once." He swallowed. "I saw them run." "I saw you," she said. He turned his head. "You did." "Yes," she said, "and you stayed." His voice was rough. "Didn't think I was worth running." She shifted closer, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. "You were wrong. Walls do not always fall because someone breaks them down. Sometimes they crack when we are forced to rely on someone else and discover we are allowed to. Safety is not the absence of danger. It is the presence of someone who does not leave when danger arrives." Barnaby slept that night for the first time in years without dreaming of being chased. Vesper slept without imagining herself alone on the floor. When morning came, neither of them felt whole, but both of them felt held. They found the cabin by accident. It crouched in a stand of aspen like a secret that had grown tired of being kept. One room, sod roof sagging under early snow, a stone chimney leaning but intact. A trapper's place abandoned years ago. The door hung crooked, but it closed. The hearth still drew. Barnaby lowered Vesper onto a pallet of old hides with a care that bordered on reverence. He moved through the cabin awkwardly, afraid of breaking something, afraid of doing the wrong thing now that the urgency had ebbed. Vesper watched him, chin lifted, mind already sorting what this place could be. "We can stay," she said. "For a while." He nodded. "I'll make it safe." And he did, quietly. He stacked wood, reset a loose hinge, dragged a broken table closer to the fire, and fixed it with a wedge and brute patience. He didn't ask permission. He didn't ask praise. He just worked. The days took on a rhythm. Barnaby hunted in the mornings, returning with rabbit or grouse slung over his shoulder. Vesper cleaned and rationed, calculating calories, smoke, salt. She learned how to read the weather by the way the light pooled at the cabin door. He learned to listen for her breath behind him before he moved too fast. They learned each other without ceremony. At first, Vesper feared being a burden again. When Barnaby lifted her to the pallet, she stiffened. When he carried water, she apologized. When he offered to move her closer to the fire, she said no, too quickly. One evening, he set the pot down harder than necessary. "You keep saying sorry," he said, not angry, just puzzled. "What for?" "For making you do things," she replied. He frowned, searching for words. "I choose to." That stopped her. "I'm not trapped with you," he added, careful, as if he knew the weight of the thought. "I'm here." Something inside her loosened. They began to trade skills. Vesper taught Barnaby how to reload without thinking, how to seat a bullet by feel, how to count shots without looking. She drilled him with scenarios, voice sharp, timing exact. "Cover left, pause, now." He obeyed, slower than a trained soldier, but relentless. Once learned, he never forgot. Barnaby taught Vesper how to make fire from wet wood, how to knot a rope so it wouldn't slip under weight, how to listen to the forest, the warning click of a jay, the silence that meant predators. She learned fast, faster than she let herself believe she could. One afternoon, a mule wandered near the cabin, spooked and half wild. Vesper watched Barnaby approach it slowly, hands low, voice gentle. "You don't dominate," she said, curious. "You invite." He shrugged. "Big things break if you rush them." She smiled at that. Laughter came unexpectedly one night when Barnaby attempted to read from an old newspaper he'd found tucked behind a beam. He stumbled over the words, jaw tightening with frustration. "Give it here," Vesper said. She read aloud, clean, crisp, until he realized she was changing the story on purpose, adding absurd details, turning dry reports into nonsense. "Hey," he protested, then laughed. A deep, surprised sound. It startled them both. The beats came, one by one. Vesper insisted on sleeping farther from the fire so Barnaby wouldn't have to move her in the night. He moved the pallet closer anyway. "You'll freeze," he said. "So will you." He smiled. She pretended not to see it. She asked about his childhood, the waystation, the names people used. He answered simply, without bitterness. She told him about boardrooms, contracts, the way men underestimated her and paid for it. He listened like it mattered. Their hands brushed over a map. Neither pulled away. The contact lingered, warm and grounding. Barnaby's breath hitched. Vesper noticed and did not comment. The test came when two men, scouts for a mining outfit, approached the cabin, suspicious and armed. Barnaby reached for his weapon. Vesper touched his wrist. "Let me." She spoke to them from the doorway, calm and sharp, eyes steady. She negotiated food for information, space for silence. The men left with a warning and a respect they hadn't expected to give. When the door closed, Barnaby stared at her. "You were terrifying," he said, awed. She smiled. "Good. A safe haven is not built by walls alone. It is built by competence recognized, by fear replaced with trust. When people are allowed to contribute as they are, confidence does not need permission. It grows." Winter pressed closer. Snow deepened. They adapted. Barnaby fashioned a harness that fit better than the belt, balanced, padded, so he could carry Vesper without pain to either of them. He practiced lifting her with efficiency, not apology. Vesper practiced shooting from his back again, not in panic, but in control. They moved together until the motions became instinct. One night, the fire burned low and the wind worried the eaves. Vesper lay awake, listening to Barnaby breathe. "Do you ever wish you were smaller?" she asked into the dark. He considered. "Sometimes. Makes doors easier." She snorted, then softer. "I used to wish I could walk again, every day." "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "I wish I could do what I can do without hating myself for needing help." He turned onto his side, careful not to crowd her. "You help me," he said. "You just don't see it yet." She did not answer, but she slept. The turning moment came during a storm. A tree fell close, too close, splintering the roof edge and dropping debris inside. Smoke choked the room. Fire threatened. Barnaby moved instantly, hauling water, clearing beams. Vesper shouted directions over the roar, voice unwavering. "Left beam first! No, brace it! Now pull!" They worked as one. When the danger passed, they sat amid the wreckage, breathing hard. Barnaby laughed, breathless. "We're ridiculous." Vesper laughed with him, free, unguarded. "We unstoppable. Later, as she checked his hands for burns, she paused. "Barnaby," she said careful, "you don't flinch when I touch you anymore." He met her eyes. "Neither do you." She reached up and adjusted the collar at his throat. An intimate, domestic motion. He froze, then relaxed. That night, they slept closer than before, not entwined, chosen. Outside, the forest held. Inside, something bloomed, not loud, not fragile, solid. They were no longer surviving the days. They were building them. The shadow came back the way it always does, wearing a familiar face. Vesper heard it first, a distant echo carried wrong by the trees, metal on stone, a whistle cut short, men moving with purpose, not hunger. Barnaby felt it in his bones. He froze mid-step, head tilting, listening to the forest the way others listen to prayer. "They're not animals," he said quietly. "They're organized." Vesper's fingers tightened on the map spread across her lap. "How many?" "6, maybe 8. He paused. "They're hunting." The cabin that had become a home shrank in an instant. Fire popped in the hearth. Snow hissed against the eaves. Outside, the pines stood indifferent. "Vultures?" Vesper asked. "Not them," Barnaby replied. "These are different." She knew what that meant before he said it. Law. Men with papers. Badges that mattered more than truth. Men who would look at her legs and her size and decide the story before hearing a word. "They'll take the gold," she said. "Then they'll take me." Barnaby's jaw tightened. "Not while I'm breathing." She rolled closer, meeting his eyes. "Listen to me. If they are marshals or deputized hunters, they won't negotiate with you. They'll see a monster with a weapon." "And you?" he asked. "They'll see property," she said evenly. "An heiress they can return for a fee." The door creaked as wind pressed against it. Footsteps crunched nearer. The men arrived at dusk. They did not announce themselves. They fanned out, efficient, practiced. One circled wide. 2 took cover by the fallen log. The leader stepped forward, lantern raised. "Barnaby Cobb," the man called, "by order of the territory, you are to lay down arms and present yourself." Barnaby stepped into the doorway, filling it. Snow caught in his hair. Firelight painted him enormous. "You don't have order here," he said. The man's eyes flicked past him, to Vesper, to the chair, to the harness. "Well, I'll be," the leader said. "There she is." Vesper felt the old heat rise, the rage that sharpened thought. "You're trespassing," she said coolly. "State your authority." The man smiled. "Deputy Marshal Hayes, and I'm authorized to recover stolen government gold and the Ashcroft heiress." Barnaby's shoulders rose. "She's not going anywhere." Hayes's smile thinned. "Son, you don't get a vote." That was the revelation, not of secrets, but of value. They didn't want Barnaby alive or dead. He was an obstacle. They wanted Vesper. This is the test that follows sanctuary, not the kind that asks who you are, but the kind that asks what you are willing to give up. Love is not measured by warmth when the fire is high. It is measured by the choices made when the fire threatens to consume everything. Hayes nodded to his men. 2 raised rifles, trained not on Barnaby's chest, but on Vesper. Barnaby moved, too fast for a man his size. He stepped sideways, blocking the line, taking the barrel on his shoulder and shoving it down with a grunt. Vesper shouted, "Barnaby, left!" He pivoted. The world fractured into motion and command. Shots rang out. Woods splintered. The cabin filled with smoke. Barnaby took a hit in the thigh, glancing but enough to slow him. He staggered, caught himself on the table. "Run!" he barked to Vesper. "Go!" "No," she snapped. "We decided together." She fired, clean, precise, forcing Hayes back behind the log. Another man fell, screaming, clutching his arm. But they were outnumbered, and Hayes knew it. "Take her," he ordered. "Leave the brute." The moment hung, knife-edged. Vesper saw the path ahead with perfect clarity. If she was taken, Barnaby would be killed later. Quietly, legally. If she ran, he would die now. She reached up and grabbed his wrist, hard. "Set me down," she said. His eyes widened. "What?" "Set me down," she repeated. "Now." He shook his head, panic flaring. "No." "Barnaby," she said, fierce and steady. "This is my choice." She slipped from the harness before he could stop her and dragged herself forward, palms burning in the snow. Hayes straightened, surprised. "Smart girl." Vesper lifted her chin. "You want me? You take me? You leave him." Barnaby roared, a sound that shook branches. He lunged, but two rifles pinned him, muzzles inches from his chest. "Don't," Vesper said softly, never looking back at him. "Trust me." Hayes stepped closer. "You'll come quietly." "I always do," she replied, "until I don't." She met Barnaby's eyes, one heartbeat, full and complete. "You gave me legs," she said. "Now give me time." Hayes hauled her up by the arm. She didn't scream, didn't fight. Barnaby stood frozen, breath sawing in his chest, watching the world take the one thing that made it make sense. The men retreated into the trees with their prize. Silence crashed down. Barnaby sank to his knees. Sacrifice is not noble because it hurts. It is noble because it is chosen. And chosen sacrifices demand answers, answers that will be paid for later. Barnaby did not chase. He waited. He waited until night took the forest, until the men grew careless, until the rhythm of their steps slowed with confidence. Then he rose. He moved without rage, without sound. He followed the tracks the way he followed Vesper's voice. Precisely when he found the camp, the men were laughing, drinking, telling stories about a giant who knew his place. Barnaby stepped into the firelight. The laughter died. He did not roar. He did not rush. He walked forward and took the lantern in one hand and crushed it. Darkness fell, and in that darkness a fortress remembered what it was built to do. Darkness was Barnaby's ally. The camp lay in a shallow bowl between pines, a careless choice made by men who believed the mountain feared badges. A fire burned low at its center. Rifles leaned against packs. Laughter had thinned to mutters and drink. Barnaby moved through the tree line without sound. He had learned the forest the way others learned scripture, by listening. He knew where the needles were thickest, where branches bent instead of snapped, where stones swallowed footsteps. His size no longer betrayed him. It served him. He waited. Patience had never been his strength. Tonight it was. A man rose to piss at the edge of the light. Barnaby stepped from the dark and wrapped one huge hand over the man's mouth, the other around his chest. There was a single muffled sound, then nothing. He set the body down gently, like freight. He took the man's knife. At the fire, Deputy Marshal Hayes was boasting. "Tell you, she didn't even beg. Thought she was clever. They always done." Vesper sat bound to a stump, wrist tied, posture straight, despite the rope cutting her skin. Her eyes were steady, watching hands, counting steps, noting who carried keys. She breathed evenly. She waited. Barnaby circled. When he struck, it was not with fury. It was with sequence. He kicked the fire first. Embers exploded outward in a red halo. Men shouted, blinded. In the confusion, Barnaby charged, not at the center, but the edge. He took a rifle and broke it against a tree. He took a second man and threw him into the brush. He took a third by the collar and slammed him down, knee pinning breath from lungs. "Drop it!" Hayes barked, raising his pistol toward Vesper's head. Barnaby stopped. Everything narrowed to that barrel. Vesper met Barnaby's eyes across the firelight. She shook her head once. Small, precise. A command. Barnaby exhaled and smiled. He stepped forward. Hayes fired. The shot cracked. Pain flared hot and white across Barnaby's shoulder. He did not fall. He kept walking. Another shot, then a click. Empty. Barnaby closed the distance and took the pistol from Hayes's hand. He did not break the man, not yet. He turned the weapon sideways and struck hard enough to end the argument. Hayes went down. Silence rushed in like water. The remaining men scrambled. One ran. Another dropped his rifle. A third froze, hands raised. Barnaby looked at them, not with hatred, but with certainty. "Leave," he said. They did. Barnaby knelt by Vesper, hands suddenly gentle again. He cut the ropes with the stolen knife, careful not to nick her skin. "You're hurt," she said immediately, fingers finding the blood at his shoulder. "I'll live." She touched his face, quick, grounding. "You waited." "I listened," he said, "like you taught me." She nodded once. Good. They didn't linger. Barnaby fashioned a sling from canvas, then lifted Vesper into the harness with practiced ease. She adjusted the straps herself, jaw set, eyes clear. "Camp's compromised," she said. "They'll come back with daylight." Barnaby turned them toward the ridge. "Then we won't be here." They moved through the night together, quiet, relentless. At dawn, the land opened into a basalt shelf overlooking a narrow pass. Below, the trail pinched to a single-file crawl, rock to one side, drop to the other. Barnaby set Vesper down behind a boulder. He tore cloth, bound his shoulder tight. "They'll follow," he said. "Yes," Vesper replied. "And here's where we ended." The men returned mid-morning, 5 now. Shaken, angry, Hayes was not among them. They advanced cautiously into the pass. "Wait," Vesper murmured. "Not yet." Barnaby crouched, breath measured. The first man entered the choke point. "Now," she said. Barnaby stood. He surged forward and seized the lead man, lifting him clean off the ground and pinning him against the rock wall. The others fired, shots ringing wild, useless. Barnaby shoved the man sideways. The body struck another, both tumbling in a tangle toward the edge. Vesper fired. One clean shot to a rifle stock, shattering it, another to a knee. She reloaded by feel, voice calm. "Left, 2 steps, throw." Barnaby obeyed. He grabbed a fallen pack and hurled it into the pass, blocking retreat. He advanced, enormous, unyielding. The men broke. One slipped, one dropped his gun, one screamed. It ended quickly. When the last sound faded, Barnaby leaned against the rock, chest heaving. Vesper slid down beside him, fingers already checking his bindings. "You stood," she said. "So did you," he replied. She smiled, small, fierce. "We always do." True strength is not found in size or speed, nor in titles or weapons. It is found in coordination, when fear is replaced by trust, when command becomes care, when 2 people move as one without needing to be told why. In that moment, power stops being spectacle and becomes inevitability. They rested until the sun climbed. Then they moved again west, away from papers and bridges and rooms that decide who belongs. By nightfall, Barnaby built a fire in a hollow ringed by stone. Vesper set his shoulder again, slow and precise. "You didn't hesitate," she said softly. "Neither did you." She reached for his hand. He let her. For the first time since the waystation, neither of them felt hunted. They felt chosen. Healing didn't arrive like mercy. It arrived like work. Barnaby's shoulder took weeks to mend. The bullet had torn muscle, not bone, but the pain lingered, deep and insistent. Vesper managed it with the same precision she used for everything else, cleaning the wound twice daily, changing bandages at dawn and dusk, never flinching, never apologizing for needing his stillness. Barnaby learned to be still. That was harder than lifting anvils or charging gunfire. He lay on his side near the fire while Vesper worked, her hands sure, her voice calm as she talked through what she was doing. He listened, not because she ordered it, but because listening made the pain smaller. "You should have let them take me," he said one evening, the thought surfacing at last. Vesper did not look up. "No. They wanted you," he continued. You could have died," she said firm, "and then I would have lived with a rescue that cost me the only person who ever chose me without condition." That stopped him. She tied the knot and leaned back on her palms, meeting his eyes. "Don't rewrite that choice," she added. "I meant it." He swallowed. "I've never been chosen before." She softened then, reaching out to rest her hand on his forearm. "I know." They stayed in that hollow for a month. Snow came early and heavy. Barnaby built walls of stone and timber, turning the hollow into a winter camp. Vesper directed the layout, fire position, windbreak, storage, her mind restless and sharp even when her body would not cooperate. They were good at this, better than they had any right to be. The nights were long. They filled them with talk. Barnaby spoke of the waystation, of hauling crates until his hands split, of being called ogre by men who needed him, of learning to shrink his presence to avoid trouble. Vesper spoke of rail lines and ledgers, of the quiet cruelty of being smiled at while erased, of learning that power meant nothing if you couldn't stand. "You don't have to be smaller here," she told him, "and you don't have to be harder," he replied. One night, as the fire burned low, Vesper said, "I don't miss walking." Barnaby blinked. "You don't?" "I miss speed," she corrected, "independence. But I don't miss the woman I was when I thought I had to prove something to everyone." He nodded slowly. "I miss being invisible sometimes." She smiled. "You're terrible at it." He laughed, then winced, then laughed again. When his shoulder healed enough to move freely, Barnaby crafted something new. He worked in secret for days, emerging with a refined harness, balanced, padded, adjustable, made to distribute weight without strain. "For when we need to move fast," he said, shy. Vesper tested it with an appraising eye. "You've improved the center of gravity," she noted. "I approve." They began to train again, not out of fear, but intention. Vesper drilled commands until they were instinct. Barnaby practiced navigating narrow ground with her weight, turning without jarring, stopping on a word. They were a system now, not desperate, deliberate. The confession came without ceremony. They were sitting under a sky bright with winter stars when Vesper said, "If we go back east, they'll keep coming." Barnaby didn't answer right away. "Then we don't have to go back." She turned to him. "I don't want to hide." "Neither do I," he said. "But we don't have to ask permission anymore." She studied his face, the heavy jaw, the scarred brow, the gentleness that lived there. "I choose this," she said. "Us, the road, the work." He nodded once. "Me too." That was all the vow they needed. By spring, stories followed them. A giant with a woman on his back, a pair who took contracts no one else would, escorting caravans through dead passes, retrieving stolen goods, breaking sieges without killing when killing wasn't required. Some called them monsters. Others called them saviors. They called themselves partners. On a clear morning, as they prepared to move again, Vesper rested her forehead against Barnaby's chest. "You know," she said, "they'll never understand us." Barnaby smiled, wide and unashamed. "They don't have to. Healing is not the erasure of scars. It is the decision to carry them together. When two broken paths align, they do not cancel each other's pain. They turn it into direction. And direction, chosen freely, is a kind of peace." They moved west with the sun at their backs, not fleeing, becoming.
Before we leave them on the road, let me ask you something quietly. What part of you has been called too much or not enough and left behind because of it? What strength were you taught to hide? What weakness were you told disqualified you from being chosen? Barnaby and Vesper didn't become legends because they were fearless or flawless. They became something unbreakable because they refused to abandon each other the way the world abandoned them. If their journey stayed with you, hold on to that feeling, because sometimes survival isn't about standing alone. Sometimes it's about finding the person who says, "Get on my back. We're not done yet."